This is the eLearning Podcast, episode number 27.
We were the Moodle partner, we were the partner for Question Mark, for Blackboard, well, you name it. The big ones, we were the partner that sold them and implemented it and supported the customers, both in education, in government, and in corporate. And I got really frustrated. So my title was something like Vice President Learning Technology, but I was responsible for that, but we were always in the middle.
Welcome to the eLearning Podcast from lmspulse.com. My name is Stephen Laddick, and I'm the director at LMS Pulse. My guest for today's episode is Kasper Spiro. He's a Dutch entrepreneur, and he's the CEO of Easygenerator.com. With a tenured background in enterprise software, Kasper realized there were glaring gaps in the way corporate training tech addresses customer issues. Long story short, he decided to join Easygenerator out of frustration with the general state of support and the needless complexity plaguing the industry. In this illuminating conversation, we talk about the story of Easygenerator, which is an easy-to-use and maintain cloud-based platform for content creators and collaborators. We also talk about how your frustration can be a powerful motivator and an innovation driver, as long as you learn to take a step back and find out who shares this frustration with you. We talk about why Kasper thinks the distance between the content creator and the employee who consumes it is a problem people don't talk about enough, and all of the unintended consequences around it. And finally, we talk about how, thanks to the pandemic, more people saw how detrimental it was for creators and learners to be separate, the update cycles for training to be way too long, and how tools like Easygenerator help in keeping things fresh. But before we get started, a quick word from our sponsor.
The eLearning Podcast is sponsored by the eLearning Success Summit. Learn from more than 40 experts how to teach, work, and learn online without being overwhelmed. Get your free ticket to the summit at elearningsuccesssummit.com. And lmspulse.com, your best source for news, information, and resources for e-learning professionals for more than 10 years. Get our free roundup of the week's top news at lmspulse.com.
Hello, Kasper. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Steve. Thanks for having me.
I'm sitting in Colorado today, even though, everybody who sees my office here will think I'm in the same place. Where do we find you in the world today?
So I'm in the Netherlands. That's where I live and where my company is. My company is in Rotterdam, which is probably well known, but I live in a small town, like 1,000 people. It's called Velp, in the south of the country. So I'm really close, like half an hour from Germany, half an hour from Belgium.
It sounds idyllic. I'm going to compete with you. I'm sitting in a very small town in Colorado called Grand Lake, which very few people know about unless you've been here. Is it the choice just because you're on vacation, because you work remotely because of COVID? We're recording this right now just for posterity in August of 2020. Is this just a choice as where you work from, or what?
So it's my home, and I decided I did live in the west of the country where The Hague and Amsterdam and Rotterdam are, but I really like the countryside, so I moved deliberately away. I work from home 2 days a week always, and then 3 days a week I commute. Now with COVID, it's a bit the other way around. So we're back in the office part-time, so I go to Rotterdam 1 or 2 days a week, and for the rest I work from home.
Fantastic.
So I have a long commute, but I work in my car a lot.
I guess that's a great thing. You are the CEO of a company called Easygenerator.
Correct.
We talk about every learning management system here on the eLearning Podcast, and we've been looking at learning management systems over at LMS Pulse for a long time, but I've never seen Easygenerator before. Tell me about what it is that. What's your background? How did you come to LMS? Were you in technology? Were you an educator, or has this been a lifelong dream?
Yeah, originally I'm a teacher, but that's like 30, almost 40 years ago. 40 years ago, I think. Yes. So I'm getting ancient. But I did a lot of things. I was an information designer where I designed knowledge management systems and performance support systems. I started an internet company in the Netherlands called Locatienet. Basically, it's Google Maps, but we were like 5 years before it. It still exists, and I founded a couple of companies. But my previous role, I worked at a company that was representing all kind of learning technology companies in the Netherlands. So we were the Moodle partner, we were the partner for Question Mark, for Blackboard, well, you name it. The big ones, we were the partner that sold them and implemented it and supported the customers, both in education, in government, and in corporate. And I got really frustrated. So I was, my title was something like Vice President Learning Technology, but I was responsible for that, but we were always in the middle. So we had our customers who were complaining about bad software, and then we would go to Blackboard and complain with them that, well, stock market is going okay, so we don't have a problem. So, and I hated that. And at the moment, at a certain moment, we were looking for a simple authoring tool. And then I encountered Easygenerator, and that's how sort of things got started. But it's basically out of that frustration with bad software companies and bad customer service and not added value, but really getting people trapped in the software so you can't move out, why I sort of started it. Yeah.
So you started Easygenerator from the ground up, though?
No, so it was an existing product, and at first they asked me to join to make it like an international success. And it was an e-learning authoring tool for instructor designers. So we started doing that for a year or two, but I concluded that it wasn't that successful. So we were competing with Lector and Articulate, and it's quite hard as an external party to come in to that market. With exactly the same pitch, because we were competing on features and they have more money, more developers, and we were just a small startup. So after 2 years, I sort of told the shareholders, I don't think that that will change the world, but I do want to change it around, because I have an old frustration for myself, and I think that I now know how to solve it, and that is not with what we are doing now. So the frustration really is that I was responsible.
What's that old frustration? Take me there.
Yeah, so it's really simple. So I was responsible for a lot of e-learning projects to create the content, and with the with the ADDIE method, and it takes like ages to create it, which is a problem because the world has already changed by the way your e-learning is finally done, and because it's so slow, it's also really expensive, which is a second problem. But the biggest problem I also have always found was that because an e-learning expert is creating a course, and he's interviewing people in the business to get the information from. There is no connection between that person who's responsible for maintaining the course and the business. So not only is it already outdated once you publish it because it's so slow, but it will be outdated over time really fast because there's no connection between the knowledge in the business and the course. So it means what we were doing was my conclusion. We spent a lot of time and a lot of money to teach people outdated stuff. So that was my frustration.
Okay, so that's great. I'm very interested to see. Have you seen any of that start to change, even in the last, let's just say, 6 months? You know, with the COVID crisis and higher education, both and business, really needing to pivot and be agile, immediately. Has any of that started to change, or are companies just sort of doing the same thing that schools are doing, where they're just kind of throwing up things with PowerPoint and, some recorded video?
No,
and
there has been a fundamental change indeed. Yeah, and that is also so maybe one step back before moving there. I will answer that in a minute. But I think the solution that I see for the problem is that people who have the knowledge should create courses and should be responsible for maintaining the course. That's the only way to keep it up to date. So if you would create a course on how to create a podcast, then you would be able to maintain it. If I would do that, I have to interview. If you learn something because you make a mistake or whatever, you have to tell me, and that will not happen. So you have to create your own course and you have to maintain it. So that's why we have the Easygenerator. It needs to be really, really easy for you to be able to create a course, because that's not that simple. So our audience is not instructor designers, but our audience is everybody who wants to share his knowledge. So, which is a really different pitch. So, and that is when we sort of decided to stop the company, completely start over. So we basically only held on to a couple of developers. We start building in 2013 the product from scratch. And we launched in DevLearn in Las Vegas I think it was October 2013. The free version, the first paid version was like in March. So after a year of development. And from there, we grew like, the last 3 years, it's around 90%, 100% growth. So we go tremendously fast. So we did find a soft spot in the market. And I think we found a niche market. It's like a new approach.
So I'm thinking immediately, like I'm working in, corporation A, right? That big corporation. I'm either a line, I don't know. First, before I ask that question, I guess, are you targeting sort of managers, like line managers or team managers, or is this, I'm a member of a team and I have a really specific skill, like I am a designer, or I am a coder, or I am a salesperson, or I am a whatever. What level are you?
It's a bit different. So we have like people buying individual licenses, and that can be either a person working in a company or a professor working in a new university. But what we target with our inbound and outbound marketing is really HR and learning and development. And we try to tell the management level that they have to do things in a different way. And if I talk to a learning manager and ask them, do you recognize that the creation of e-learning is too slow, it's too expensive, and it's impossible to maintain? I always get 3 yeses. So when I tell them I have a solution for that, they're always interested. I never got a no there. Okay, not everybody buys, but everybody's interested.
Okay, so your entry point is HR or learning development. So your entry point is through the HR or the learning and development department. Are they then creating the knowledge, or do they then pass it down to, again, like the sales?
Yeah, originally they are. And so we have a lot of different companies, and the reasons behind. So it's always a mix of the speed, the cost, and the maintenance. So for example, if I look at a company like Unilever who's using Easygenerator, so for them, it's like creating learning with the speed of the business. So they have parts of their company, so it's not a factory, that is not changing that rapidly. The factory is quite stable, but product development, marketing, sales, those are going, the changes are going so fast that it takes longer to develop an e-learning course than they need to change their market approach or product. So they need to develop e-learning with the speed of the business. Basically, that's what they want. And in order to do that, they need to have the people in the business to create the content. So that is the reason for them to use Easygenerator. It's the speed. If I look at a company like Nielsen, the data company in the US, that was our first big corporate user. So they are in a rough spot. So currently they are reorganizing, but in the old days they were like they didn't have that much competition, but now they have like small companies like Google and Facebook who also have data on people. So yeah, it's a bit harder. So for them, they really have way less people in the learning department than they had like 5-6 years ago when they started with us. So they need to be able to create content in more than 140 countries and also localize it with a very small team. The only way to do that is to use the business for that. So for them, it's really like cost and effectivity, and it's just the only way for them to make it happen. So that is really for them. So the other things are, of course, that it's fast and stuff like that is also interesting, but that's the key thing for them. And if you look at, for example, a company like Kellogg's is using Easygenerator, and they have a learning manager, and he really believes that the business should own learning. So that is much more the maintenance thing. So he thinks that learning can be a solution, but only if the business really thinks that it's needed. So he doesn't provide solutions anymore. He just tells them it's your own problem. So learning can be a solution, and if you want to create it here, Easygenerator, and go ahead and do it, but you have to do it yourself. And if you have any questions, let me know. So it's really much more about making the business responsible, which is really the key thing of our employee-generated learning approach, how we call it, because you have to transfer the responsibility for the creation and maintenance from the learning department into the business. And the learning department becomes like a coach, a facilitator for the business in order to make that happen. But we also have a company that's like the fourth business case, probably like Electrolux. They were moving for the first time to e-learning. So they had a whole bunch of trainers, and they had to train people on using how to sell their equipment. And they were doing that in an old-fashioned way, people flying through Europe and teaching people all kinds of things. And now they're moving online, and what they asked, they applied the flipped classroom. So all the trainers put all the knowledge part in an Easygenerator course that people have. Sorry, something happened?
You just hit mute somehow.
Okay, sorry. That's not a smart thing to do during a podcast. Can I just continue?
Yeah, sure. So you were telling me that they you said they were implementing the flipped classroom, and
Yeah, so and then the rest of the training will be done in a shorter face-to-face session, and right now it's of course online due to COVID. But so it's like they are new in e-learning and using Easygenerator as a starting point. And maybe what I have to tell you, because mostly of the time you interview LMSs and we're an authoring tool. So I think 7 or 8 years ago I had a talk in Dev in a presentation. The title was "The Death of the Corporate LMS." Because I believe, and I strongly believe, that the old school approach with the old school LMS doesn't have a future. So what we do course hosting and result tracking and all that for free. So if you buy an authoring license, you get that for free, because we believe that that is not the part that actually creates the value.
Awesome. And so do you find that this is a fundamental shift for people, or is this a real easy leap? Like if I'm used to using, Totara or Moodle or Blackboard or whatever flavor of system within my corporation, is this a fairly simple leap for people to adopt this new system, to adopt Easygenerator? And then because where I'm kind of going is, it seems like this iterative process. It's much like, just let's take a look at it as, and I'm not trying to simplify your product, but it's like a Google Doc, right? You build a doc to share information, and then that's obsolete in a week, so you either edit that doc or you create a new one, and you just sort of end up with 1,000 versions of that document or that promotional material or whatever. Is that kind of the feel of what happens with this learning material, or is it something different?
No, it is something different. So it is much more, I think, connected to a fundamental change that we have. So I think there are a couple of, so I just did the research to trends, or I did it last year to sort of find out where are things moving, also to decide for my company, where do I have to move. So it's maybe interesting to quickly talk you through those trends, because that sort of gives you an answer on the question.
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay, so I think that there are, I looked at the trends in blogs and podcasts and white papers and found like 120 different ones, but I brought them back to 4 main ones. And I think one of them is that we're moving from formal to informal learning. People like Jay Cross, I probably know him with his book Informal Learning and his workplace learning approach. They really came from an e-learning background. Jay Cross was the guy who actually coined the word e-learning, but he was also one of the first to sort of move away from that and said, well, just learning, formal learning, classroom education is only a part of the solution. You have to have knowledge sharing, you have to have performance support as well, learning on the job. And so that also the 70-20-10 principle is connected to that. So that is what he was working on. But what happened, so if you believe that or not, you can see that it's happening. People, learning departments are spending now less money on formal learning and more money on other things. So that is one of the things that we see happening. So another trend that I see is that it goes from learning to support. So for example, if you look at the 5 moments of learning need from Bob and Con, so they are the guys behind that. So what they have, well, this may be a bit hard to explain in one sentence, but the essence there is
I don't know the 5 moments of learning. You got to tell me the 5 moments of learning.
Oh, you don't know what them. So
no,
it's when something is new, when there is something more, when you have to solve a problem. I can't get all of them. When something has changed, and I forgot number 5. But
we'll find it. Don't worry. We'll put them in the notes of the podcast. Don't worry.
Yeah. So sorry for that. But the essence for that is that if you look at a low moment of need, for example, when you're completely new to something, a formal training could be a part of the solution. So an e-learning course or a classroom session could be helpful. But if you want to solve a problem on your work, which is also a learning moment, then you just want to Google it, maybe in a corporate directory, or you don't want to stop working and go into e-learning or to solve a problem, how to do something in Excel or something. So that is really different mindset. So what they found is that when you are new, then formal learning can be really important, and then you get you have the learning curve, but then you get the forgetting curve, so you have to repeat over and over again. Then learning, also formal learning, but also other parts of learning can play a bigger role. But when you are competent on your job, then you still have a lot of learning needs. But then very often formal learning is not the way to go. What you need is information on your fingertips that if you are stuck in your work, that will help you solve the problem so you can continue working. So that is what they said. So it's not about learning or just learning. It's also about making sure that people can actually perform on their job. So it's from learning to performance is another direction. And then you have like the shift from or maybe I should simplify it a bit. Well, the shift from knowledge to skills is another one, which is really important. So, I was talking about Excel, and I use Excel a lot for the company to do all the figures, but I'm not a hero in it. So sometimes I have to do a query, and I think, okay, I know you can do it, but I don't know how. So I just Google it. I will find the formula, but I know how to apply it. So I don't need to have the knowledge. I need to know where to find it, and I need to be able to apply it. That is much more important. So people like Cathy Moore have been writing about that with their approaches. And I think that is also a big trend. But what I did, I put those trends in a quadrant. And if you do that in a smart way, you will find that there are like 4 parts where learning is divided. So it's formal learning. It is basically knowledge sharing. You have performance support, and you have much more like skill development. So then you're talking about leadership development programs and that. And what I see what is happening with Easygenerator is that we started out as a course creation tool. So it was formal learning, but now it's being done almost completely by subject matter experts, by people in the business. And with that, it's still learning, but it also becomes knowledge sharing because it's learning created by your peers. And what we now see happening as a next step is that we want to make it easier because the essence is not to create courses, the essence is to sort of share your knowledge. So we're now creating smaller assets. We call them one-page resources. For example, a checklist, a how-to guide, a step-by-step description, a curated document where you could put in some couple of sources that are interesting for people. So like a one-page document where you can share your knowledge in a various things. For example, a checklist, the 10 things you need to organize before starting a podcast. That is something you could create really quickly and share with your peers or somebody else who wants to do a podcast. So what we see is that things are now moving in that direction more and more. So it's moving from formal learning to knowledge sharing to performance support. And it's not moving away from formal learning, but what we see that formal learning is for if you talk about compliance and security, then you still have to organize that top down. So it's a bit like the TV approach. There's a program, you have to follow it, and if it's on, you have to watch it, and if you miss it, it's a shame. And what's now happening is that with the knowledge sharing, it's also connected to the LXPs. I'm not sure if you heard about them, but there are learning experience platforms. They are much more like a Netflix kind of learning. So all the information is there. Very often it's still learning, but it's just sitting there waiting for you as learner to come in. So the initiative is no longer with the learning department who programs it for you. It's just a Netflix where you go in and you find the course or the training you want to take, like you do your movie with Netflix. And I think the next step that we're now moving towards is more like a Quora kind of things, where people basically not only are responsible for getting the answers, so the learning, but also providing the information. Or Wikipedia is an example for that.
You and I both have gray hair, and that's a beautiful thing. It's a wonderful thing. What is the reaction that you've had within, especially I'm interested here in some of these larger organizations, for people who are, they've been in the workforce for the last 25, 30 years. They're not millennials, they're still, but they've still got another 10 years left in their career path or whatever.
So somebody like me, I'm 58, so
well,
around there.
Hey, I'm, maybe I dye my hair. Maybe I should, has the adoption rate been different? Has the adoption, or is it, I guess, do we find there's a generational difference between, what people want from learning, or is it really personality driven? Some people are just agile and they want that, and they're willing to adopt and change and whatnot. And you could be a curmudgeon if you're 20, or you could be a curmudgeon if you're 55, 60.
I believe the whole millennials thing is one big hoax. I don't believe in it at all. So in my company, so in Rotterdam office, we have like 30 people. So we have now 2 people, I think, in their 30s, and the rest is in their 20s. So that's all millennials. So what I believe, it's not like when you're born what determines how you look at things. Maybe a bit. I think it's much more when you're in the starting of your career, you have a different approach of things. So if you look at me now, I'm different than when I was 20. But at 20, I was probably more like a millennial. So I think it's much more the phase where you're in. So I think it's that. And it's the same with authoring. It's not that people in a certain role or a certain age or a certain experience will write. It's much more their personality, because it's like If you look at what you do, a podcast to share your knowledge. So you see people, young and old people do that. The same is with blogging. So some people do it, other people don't. And I think it's much more, some people have to drive to do that and others don't. So I once created, so you have the 70-20-10 with formal learning, knowledge management, and informal learning. I created my own 70-20-10 rule for authors. So I think you have like 10% that you can discuss about the percentage, but a small percentage that will actively create content in your company, which is a good thing, because if you have like 100,000 people and everybody would create 10 courses a year, you would go crazy. So if you have like just 1% or 5% of people doing that, it's already huge. So only a small percentage will share it, and only a small percentage will do a podcast by himself or write a blog like I do. So then you have a second group, and those are the people who are willing to collaborate with those people. So they will give feedback on it. They will, if they are asked, it will be a co-author, but they will not take the initiative for it. So they're sort of like the people who are sort of supporting that initiative. So let's call that the 20%. So it's a smaller group. And the vast majority is just there to consume the information. Like people listening to your podcast is way more people than the people creating your podcast. And I think it's not different, but I think it's much more like a personality thing than it's an age thing. And of course, you need to have some knowledge and you need to have some experience and some confidence in that it's valuable for other people. So probably somebody who's new, 19-year-old in a company is not a bit less likely to create a course on something, although maybe you write a course on his onboarding experience, which could be.
Sure.
It depends a bit.
So tell me about, I could see people are enthusiastic. They get Easygenerator. They're like, cool, here's a really drag and drop authoring tool. This is going to be so easy. What are the biggest fails that, you see people who are creating knowledge or authoring knowledge that they want to put out for their peers? What are the 4 or 5 biggest fails that they do?
Yeah, so I think the biggest quality concern is quality. So if they create content and keep that up to date, but it's like really, really, really bad learning, then there's probably no point in taking that. So that is one of the challenges we have. So we offer all kinds of structural support inside the tool. So for example, we have developed something like a learning objective maker that actually based on Bloom's taxonomy in 4 simple steps will help you create a proper learning objective, and that will help you through the process. We're now looking at something, it's sort of like an AI-driven coach that will look over your shoulder with a lot of rules in it, with didactical rules, but also rising rule that sort of will coach you in doing. So if you create a lot of things which are not, it will sort of point you in the right direction, and it will analyze the course that you create. So we're sort of experimenting with that as we speak. So we're trying to improve quality. But I think our biggest asset basically is our support team. So we have a support tool built into Easygenerator. So you can chat live with real people. They know about the product, but they also know about didactics. So you can ask them 19 hours a day, any question, and they will give you an answer within 2 minutes. And I think that is a huge asset. And the other thing that we do, we onboard people. Although it's a very simple tool, we will give people an onboarding. We do a lot of webinars on like best practices, how to create proper e-learning. So we're really sort of more like with the people in Easygenerator, coaching, guiding, helping people to do a better job. But at the same time, we are sort of automating that as well as much as we can and building that knowledge into the tool. I think that is the biggest challenge.
You said that you also host the learning material, for people.
We can do that, yeah.
Does that then?
You can also put it in an LMS through SCORM.
Okay,
you have that option.
But do they? Do you also? Where I was going with that is, do you also have sort of a public-facing area as well, where let's just say we're building knowledge, and it's all been built for company A, but we want to publish some of it as public, that could be publicly consumed? Is that possible?
Yeah, we had that idea at the beginning. We thought that would be like our growth hack, that somebody at a big company would create a marketing or sales course, and people would find that on the web, and then sort of basically a company is all about confidence. They don't want their content to be exposed. So we did a test with free accounts to sort of index them in Google, but even that gave problems. So we had that idea and we thought that would be our biggest boost, but that never happened because just a big corporation, we have to sign contracts of 60, 70, 80 pages. That's all about confidentiality. And and security and and privacy and stuff like that. So yeah, I think that we might be, we can ask people, so do you want your course maybe to be indexed by Google so other people can find it, or can we put it out? But I think that only a very small percentage is allowed to do it, and even a small percentage is willing to do it. So the idea is really cool, but it doesn't work in practice.
Yeah, no, I just wondered if you had found a workaround for that. I could see the.
No, we didn't. No.
Kasper, final question for you. You've already taken us through your, beautifully through your vision for how things are evolving. What do you see, if we talk this time next year, a year from now, what's evolving in, and what do you think are going to be the major breakthroughs in the next year? Is it going to be more of the same? Is it going to be more and more shifts for L&D departments, really doing agile, just in time or on demand learning? Is there going to be a return to blended learning? Is it where more and more people are getting face to face? What is it that you predict for the next 6 to 12 months?
Yeah, what I see the last few months through the whole Corona COVID thing, that has been a huge change. At first for the positive, because it's like a huge boost for our business. So we see that we have more leads, we have more customers. We see sales cycles are way shorter than they were ever before. But mostly we see a huge number of companies, and I'm really surprised there are so many companies who don't do anything with e-learning. So they all are in PowerPoint and PDF, and are now for the first time really considering e-learning. And I think that's what is interesting is most of them are looking for an LMS to start, and then we explain to them, so that's not the way to start, because if you're new in e-learning, it's about content. You need to create courses, you need to share that with it, you can do it with Easygenerator only on a simple level, but just get started, find out what worked for you and your company, and then decide what you need, because otherwise you buy any LMS and you don't know even what your requirements are. So it's just first, it's a bit the same when you started dating with somebody. You don't propose them to marry you the same day. You have to sort of learn how that works and how the person works. So and I think that is one of the things, that it's not only with companies who are new to e-learning, but also that the whole shift. So the experiment that we're in now, that everybody is working from home globally, that is like a huge shift in mindset. So I think that, and that is really great, because basically technology is no longer an issue. So we are a problem, and you can share that with anyone across the world, and we can build anything. So the technology is there, and of course it needs to become better and faster, but that's happening. So I think the limitation was in our mindset, and the mindset was really that people don't like to read from screens. They don't like to meet on screens. And of course, if I go to the office and I meet a new employee there, it is different than meeting them face to face.
So Kasper, last question I like to ask everybody here on the podcast is, if we talk a year from now, or even 6 months from now, what's the disruption that you're seeing, with COVID, and how do you see this, what's your predictions for how things will continue to evolve for both corporations, higher education, and the adoption, the acceptance of e-learning?
Yeah, so if you look at corporations, which we are mostly working with, I think the change is already there and it's already huge. So we have a tremendous amount of new customers in the last few months. And to my surprise, a lot of those companies are completely new to e-learning. They come from a background of doing things by face-to-face training, PowerPoint, and suddenly they came with, okay, we are doing this kind of training face-to-face already for 20 years, and we need to move them online tomorrow. And that is really awesome. So I actually had an extremely cool story from Mount Sinai, the hospitals in New York. Mm-hmm. They are using Easygenerator. And the cool thing there is, and they are using Easygenerator, but have a lot of other learning tools. And then COVID hit, and it was really bad. So they have I think 5 hospitals in New York, and they were in the midst of it. And so they got new people in. They had people that had to come from one department to go to intensive care. They had people, I think, from the military coming in to help. They had been trained. They had new equipment they never had before. So their learning manager just got something, okay, you have 1 week to arrange this. Go for it. And it was really serious, because it was about lives. And he looked at his complete set of tools and said, I can't do that. And then he said, okay, we'll go 100% with Easygenerator. So they created courses with Easygenerator, they published them in Easygenerator, they did the certifications with Easygenerator, and they did the exams with Easygenerator. And they managed to do it. They actually saved money. And I think that is something, actually saved lives, I have to say, sorry, not money. And that is something really awesome. And I think that is something also that indicates what's happening. So we went from like a nice to have to a must have. Learning is always a must have, but now e-learning has become, I think, the new standard. And that whole new mindset with people already doing that will change how they do their work. A company who didn't do that are now doing it. They are forced to it and they will never move away from it. It's the same as like think with Zoom, it has been exploded and it will stay there because it is so much easier to communicate in this way. And we actually do some meetings in my company already because we are really international. So only 20% of my customers are in the Netherlands. So 80% are all over the world, most of them in America. So we do every sales and marketing and customer success from Rotterdam. We do everything online. So we work with Zoom already for years. But there are meetings. So if you are looking at a Zoom screen and you share a spreadsheet in your management team and you're all looking and you can actually point it works way better than sitting in a room with 5 people looking at a screen a few meters away. So it has a lot of advantages. And I think that with the experiment we're currently in, the forced experiments, I think that took away a couple of boundaries we had. I really believe now the sky is the limit for e-learning.
That's fantastic. One thing that, sorry, I said it was my last question, but here's my last question. One thing that I find interesting is I hear often that people, they don't want to look at screens. Like my wife, she'll always prefer to get a book or an actual physical magazine if she wants to read. But we find that, it's impractical to print materials and those kinds of things. Have you found a difference between people being forced to say, okay, look, you got to be your desktop or your laptop, but if you move it to a phone or you move it to a tablet, are people more willing to sort of do that because they can it kind of feels more like they're using a book, or am I just kind of making that up?
No, I think it's really important. I think it's again that mind shift. So if I look at my company, so Easygenerator is a paperless company already for like 10 years. So we don't own a printer. We don't own an archive. Everything is digital. And that is because I will make a mess when paper. So we have a rule in the company: if you give me something on paper, it doesn't count. I need to have it digital. Then it's valid. So I read books always online on my iPad or my phone, always. And I love it because I can make notes. I can search on things. I have my whole library with me. So so I have a few books. So I have one here. So I was looking to the learning part. It's from J. Cross. And the only reason I have this book is because the signatures of all the authors are in there.
Nice.
So that's the only reason I have a physical book. And I wrote some books myself. They're in over there, but that is like 35 years ago. But I'm the only one in the company that really loves ebooks. So as I said, my company, most of the people are in their 20s, and they all want to have paper books. And I believe it's just a mindset. So if they are going to read online, so let's say we have a tree crisis, so we don't have any paper anymore. So everybody has, the books will be banned and you have to read it online. And then only then they will discover how great it is to read an ebook, to carry it with you, to make notes, to search on it, and all the advantages you don't have on a paper book, because it's just an idea, it's a feeling. And when you're forced to leave that, then of course you miss something. It's different holding an iPad or holding a book. And so I understand that. It's the same like a different meeting somebody in person. But I really believe that if we sort of force to experience it, then only then we are able to sort of appreciate the advantages like we now do with learning and online meetings.
Kasper, this has been a fantastic conversation. The depth of knowledge was fantastic. I love the models that you put on the table. I'm excited to follow up with you in a year and just see where Easygenerator is at, and I wish you great success.
Well, thank you for that, and I'm looking forward to our next conversation.
Thanks again for tuning into today's episode of the eLearning Podcast. If you like what you've learned today in this episode, I encourage you to either follow us or subscribe to us on Facebook or Twitter or YouTube. And please do share this episode with 1 or 2 of your colleagues or friends. Also, I just want to remind you that you can level up your online learning game with all of the information that's available at the eLearning Success Summit. You can get your free ticket at elearningsuccesssummit.com. And finally, You can also stay up to date on everything that's important, all the news and the resources for e-learning professionals at lmspulse.com. Get our free newsletter by just going to lmspulse.com today. Thanks again.